Hey, what's up, guys? Week 5 was a brutal week for injuries in the NFL, and it's going to open up a lot of opportunity in the Week 6 DFS slate. I'm going to dig into where some of that opportunity lies, and we're going to take a look at some of my favorite games in the DFS Week 6 slate right after this. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heatseeker Sports, and this is my first look at the NFL Week 6 slate from a DFS perspective. Before we dig into some of these matchups and injuries, please hit like on the video, hit subscribe. You're going to want to make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel. Been pumping out a lot of winners on the game script shows that I've been doing this season. Was joined by Spread a Stare once again on Monday, and we pretty much nailed the game script once again. Didn't get the captain right, but we got just about everything else in that game script right. And if you watched the show, you made money. I came within a Luke Musgrave catch of winning my first ever seat to the King of the Beach contest. So it was a pretty crazy sweat for me on Monday night. And hopefully Thursday night, we'll get there with the Kansas City Chiefs game script coming up some point tomorrow. I'll dig into that. I'll dig into that game against Denver. But for now, let's take a look at what's going on in Week 6 of the NFL season for the DFS DraftKings slate. I'm going to take a look at some of these injuries first. A lot of injuries happening this week. So it's a pretty banged up week as far as some of the biggest skill position names that have been just crushing this year just got hurt this week. Looks like several of them are on IR now, and they're going to dig into some of that. For the Thursday game, I'll just mention it since I have it called up. Greg Dulcich might come back this week for the Broncos. He was designated to return from IR, so he might play against the Chiefs this week. I tend to think that they wouldn't start him yet, but we'll find out tomorrow. Travis Kelce is questionable. Looks like he practiced limited capacity on Tuesday. So Travis Kelce looks like he's probably going to play, but we'll find that out tomorrow as well. As far as the Titans, looks like Treylon Burks is still questionable. Commanders, I don't see anything there. Justin Jefferson is the big one. He is on IR, I believe. So he's going to miss several games, which is good for Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne, but not good for Justin Jefferson best ball owners for sure. For the Seahawks, Bengals game, it looks like T. Higgins is still questionable. We'll find out what T. Higgins' status is. He missed last week, which set up Jamar Chase for a monster game against Arizona. For the 49ers-Browns game, it looks like Deshaun Watson is still questionable. He's day-to-day. As of Tuesday, he's got that bruised rotator cuff. So we'll see if Deshaun Watson plays this week against the 49ers. Even if he does play, not the best matchup. We got the Panthers versus Dolphins game. We got A-Chain is the big one here. A-Chain is on injured reserve. Looks like he's going to be out for a few weeks with his knee injury. According to the coaches, it's not quote-unquote season ending, but you never want to hear the term season ending in any sort of analysis when it comes to a stud running back like Devon A-Chain. From Jeff Wilson, I think he's designated to return. So we'll see what happens with Jeff Wilson. If not, it's the Mostert show this week against the Panthers. With the Detroit Lions versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jahmyr Gibbs is questionable. He missed last game. Amon-Ra St. Brown looks like he's going to go. He missed last game as well. As far as the Bucs, there's nothing to report there. Colts versus Jacksonville. Anthony Richardson lost for at least a few games with a bruised AC joint, I believe was the diagnosis, but yeah, he's not going to be able to throw for a few weeks. So Anthony Richardson on IR. Zay Jones of the Jaguars banged up his knee again in that London game. So we don't know what his status is going to be for Sunday. But if he is out, that is good for Christian Kirk, because Christian Kirk was racking up targets when Zay Jones was out for a couple weeks already this season. Saints versus Texans. Tank Dell had a concussion and had to leave the game this past Sunday. So Tank Dell is a status that we're going to want to monitor this week. New England versus the Raiders. Not too much going on there. Cardinals versus the Rams. We got Keontae Ingram in the game this week because James Conner is on, I believe he's on IR. So he's gonna miss multiple weeks with an injury. So sucks for James Conner. He was having a good year this year, but Keontae Ingram is the one who is going to have some opportunity this week. Philadelphia at the Jets. Rashad Penny, you might as well leave him on injury report. For the Jets, I'm not really seeing too much of a report there, so I'm not sure what's going on. It looks like Sauce Gardner. I thought he got injured in that game this past Sunday, but maybe he's okay. Giants, that's a Sunday night game, but for that, just to keep on your radar, Daniel Jones left with a neck injury this past week, and Saquon Barkley is still day-to-day, week-to-week, whatever he is. He might play this week, though. For the Bills, Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox are both showing up on the injury report, so we can take a look at that during the Showdown show. Dallas Cowboys at the Chargers. That's the highest total game on the week. Let me find out if that is on. Yeah, that's a Monday game, so we don't need to even think about that just yet. So we'll get into those other games. Washington at Atlanta. Not too much, like interest in this game. It's a couple, teams that are, not the best teams, but Desmond Ritter's got a pretty good matchup because Washington's giving up 22 points a game to the quarterback position. Washington's defense has just been bad this year. They're giving up points to the wide receiver position as well. They're giving up 25 points to the slot. That makes who does that make interesting? It doesn't really make anyone too interesting on Atlanta's side because they don't get enough passing volume. Maybe Kyle Pitts. If Kyle Pitts runs enough of his routes in the weak spot of Washington, that could make Kyle Pitts pretty interesting this week. On the Washington side, Logan Thomas would be the only one with an interesting matchup on that side. Atlanta's played pretty good defense against running back and wide receiver, so not really seeing a lot of interesting stuff on that side. Going to probably ignore that game altogether, except maybe Bijan. I have to look into his matchup a little bit more as the week goes on, but Bijan might be interesting. But Washington's got a pretty good run defense in general, so I'm not really interested there. Let's go to this next game here. We're going to Minnesota versus Chicago. Now, this game could be interesting because two teams with really bad defenses. I don't know if they're going to necessarily be on the radar because the total is only 44.5. That's kind of a middling total, but there's a ton of fantasy weapons with good matchups in this game. And basically the only bad matchup, for Chicago is the run defense of Minnesota, which has actually been holding opponents to 17 running back points per game. But Minnesota can basically attack Chicago any way they want. Might be a big game for Madison with Chicago giving up 31.5 fantasy points a game to DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So keep Minnesota on your mind this week. If we can get a decent cheap stack on or under owned stack at least for the Minnesota side, that would make them very interesting. And I would guess that a lot of ownership is going to go to Addison, just missing Jefferson anyways. I would keep an eye on that ownership, though, because if the Addison ownership is high, then it's good to pivot to Madison and go with the run game against Chicago and vice versa. So keep an eye on that. Hawkinson also has a good matchup against that Chicago defense. On the Chicago side, it looks like wideouts have the best matchup, with Minnesota giving up 30.7 points a game to wideouts. That puts our guy DJ Moore, called him in the captain a few nights ago, right back on our radar. And Darnell Mooney, I actually like Darnell Mooney in that situation too. So DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney, I like them. Justin Fields, he's got another good matchup coming off of 2 big games. I like Justin Fields again this week. Hopefully his ownership can stay in check. He's a little bit more expensive this week than he has been the past few weeks. As you can see, he scored 33 points last week and 33 points the week before that. So he's been on a tear, and I think he's actually went from being, everybody calling for him getting benched to now like everybody loves him again, especially in the fantasy community. So Justin Fields, always a good play, especially in a matchup like this. DJ Moore, the other guy I mentioned last week, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns in our captain spot, putting up 52 fantasy points. From a captain perspective, that translated to about 77, I think, 77, 78 fantasy points. Just a monster week for DJ Moore. So other guy, Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney has not been getting targeted a lot, so maybe he's off the radar, unless, you think that he might break out this game, or maybe they make an effort to get him involved. Jordan Addison, 9 targets last week, so he's starting to come alive. He's had some big weeks, 6 targets in week 1, 5 in week 2, 8 week 3, nothing in week 4 pretty much, but then he had 9 targets last week, put up 18 fantasy points. Showing that upside, I like Jordan Addison this week, especially in the matchup, but not only the matchup, but in his circumstances with no Justin Jefferson this week. Alexander Madison was the other guy. Now, we've got Cam Akers to contend with now. Looks like Cam Akers showed up a little bit in this past game. 5 attempts, 15 yards, 2 receptions on 2 targets. Only put up 3.8, fantasy points, but you hate to see it with somebody poaching touches away from a workhorse back that we had in Madison. Madison last week only put up 12.8. Madison's just been awful this year. So yeah, nothing much to write home about Madison. He's had some, some difficult matchups, but maybe this week will be a get right spot for Madison. So keep him on your radar. Move on to the next game. Seattle versus Cincy. I like this game. This is a game that's probably going to be popular, but I think it's going to be popular on the Cincinnati side, which leaves us opportunity on that Seattle side. The point total is middling. It's only a 44.5 point total. We got Cincy as favorites at home, 2.5 point favorites. We'll check the ownership real quick. Ownership on Burrow is looking to be high. But if we have to scroll down pretty far to find Geno. Geno's only at 3%. So this looks like a Geno week to me. We'll check out his wide receivers. Wide receivers, I'm looking at Tyler Lockett, 13% ownership in a game that should be, pretty significantly back and forth. DK Metcalf, I have to scroll way down to find DK Metcalf. He's only at 3.5% ownership. This is only Wednesday, so we don't know how that's going to change. I would imagine that those ownerships are going to creep up as the week goes on. But from a matchup perspective, for those wide receivers, let's see what that is going to be for them. Wide receiver matchup is not horrible. Looks like Cincy has been preventing, only allowing 13 points a game to the wideouts, but I don't know if they've necessarily faced a team quite like Seattle yet with all the weapons that Seattle has. Seattle's got a good tight end matchup too. So keep an eye on those tight ends in Seattle, because Seattle likes to target them at, I believe we went over it on Showdown the other day. It was like something like a 20% target rate for those tight ends. So that's interesting. Slot receiver getting the most points against Seattle. They're getting 28 points a game, DraftKings points a game versus the slot. So that puts Tyler Boyd actually in the radar, and Jamar Chase has been running a lot more slot routes with Joe Burrow being banged up so far this season. So Jamar Chase is always going to be interesting. I kind of like the idea of stacking the other side and then running it back with Jamar Chase, just based on, like the ownership that I'm looking at, but also, this seems like a game that, could go back and forth and could end up scoring a little bit more than that 44.5 point total we're seeing. So move on to the next game. San Francisco at Cleveland. This is going to be another injury situation with Deshaun Watson. Cleveland's got a really good defense, so I'm not really looking to target much of anything against them. The only decent matchup I see is for Elijah Moore. San Francisco getting up 26 points a game to the slot position. So let's look at Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore last week had only 4 targets. He only had 9 the week before that, 9 the week before that. So two good weeks in a row, and 2 and 3. He had 7 targets week 1. So every week he's been pretty good except for last week, but he hasn't scored any fantasy points. His highest week is 12.8 fantasy points, and that came in week 3. So Elijah Moore, keep him on your radar in this matchup. He might be the only direction that they have to even throw to. But if we got this Thompson Robinson guy again, you know what? I'm hearing that PJ Walker might even start this week. So yeah, just keep an eye on this game. This is going to be San Francisco defense game, I think. So keep an eye on the injury report there and see what the fallout is. But Elijah Mitchell, really the only person with a good matchup on either side in this game. It's going to be a defensive matchup. So move on to New Orleans versus Houston. New Orleans versus Houston. What kind of matchup are we looking at here? 42.5 point total. Not a ton of good matchups. Looks like Kamara is going to have a good matchup at running back. Let's see what Kamara did last week. Kamara last week, Kamara's been on fire. He scored 21 points 2 weeks ago, and he scored 19 points last week, and he's got another good matchup this week. So keep an eye on Kamara. I don't know what his ownership is going to be. Let's take a look at ownership for Kamara. Find out if he's going to be chalky this week. It does not look like he's chalky at all. Right now, he's not on really anyone's radar. He's under 10%, I'm seeing. So keep Kamara on your radar this week. On the other matchups that I'm seeing, it looks like Houston has a good matchup in the slot. So that's where Robert Woods has been running a lot of routes, but Tank Dell's been running a decent amount of routes from the slot too. So Tank Dell, this could be another Tank Dell week. We've seen him all season, just tearing it up. He's been a little bit slow the last 2 weeks. He had to come out of the game last week, so only got 4 targets, but he still put up 8 points even with 4 targets. 3 targets the week before that. Before that, he had 7 targets, 10 targets, and 4 targets. So he's a few weeks removed from that, those 20-point games. So this is a play where if I saw his ownership way down, he would make a interesting play. But he's also 5,000 now, so he's not the same guy that he was a few weeks ago. So maybe Tank Dell isn't the best guy to target, and it's not exactly the best matchup, and it doesn't exactly have a great total. So other than Tank Dell and his potential opportunity this week, I'm not really interested in this game. We got Indy versus Jacksonville, the division rivals. I think they play each other pretty well usually. I think Houston spoiled Indy a few times for playoff runs. But yeah, this is a game with a total of 46.5. I like the total on this game. I like the total on this game. I like the matchups for both quarterbacks. They both have good quarterback matchups. This could be an ugly stack week with Gardner Minshew. Let's see how much Gardner Minshew is. Gardner Minshew is only 5K, and he's got a good matchup against this Jacksonville secondary. So yeah, Gardner Minshew could be interesting. Who would we stack with Gardner Minshew this week? Looks like the tight end has the best matchup. Wideouts are okay, so I would probably just stick with like Michael Pittman. You don't really need to get too cute. Last week I was talking up Josh Downs. Josh Downs had a pretty decent week last week. Let's see what he did. Josh Downs ended up getting 15.7 fantasy points at a $3,700 salary. That bumped his salary this week up to $4,100, which makes him much less interesting. What's Pittman doing? What's Pittman been doing? Pittman scored 10 points last week, only had 7 targets. Well, 7 targets is pretty good, but when you consider he was getting 11 targets, 12 targets, 11 targets. The week that Anthony Richardson had the concussion, I think that was against Baltimore, and Pittman ended up coming in and getting 11 targets in that game. So, yeah, Pittman with Gardner Minshew is an interesting stack there. It looks like the Jacksonville Jaguars are more vulnerable to wideouts. Let's see. Gardner Minshew came in that Baltimore game. He started the Baltimore game. He came in the Houston game. So let's look at the targets for Pittman on those games. We're looking at 12 targets and 11 targets. So look for Pittman to put up double-digit targets again this week, maybe against Jacksonville. That makes Gardner Minshew to Pittman stacks very interesting. And Pittman's only 6,300. That is pretty cheap. And you got a run back opportunity with Christian Kirk, with Zay Jones if he's out this week or if he's hurt. It's day to day right now. He sat out practice on Wednesday, so Zay Jones is up in the air right now. But we also got Calvin Ridley as a run back too, and he's not that expensive at 6,700. He broke out this past week, 23.6 points against the Buffalo Bills. So Calvin Ridley also interesting this week. This is an interesting stack opportunity for us with the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on Indy, and they're playing. Looks like they're playing in Jacksonville. So I would rather have this game play in Indy for more of a shootout potential. But like Jacksonville, playing in Jacksonville isn't horrible, isn't the end of the world. ETN doesn't have like a great matchup, but it's not a bad matchup. So ETN is another run back potential there. So moving on to the next games, we got Carolina versus Miami. Get rid of this. Carolina versus Miami. Interesting game here. This one, I think, is getting a lot of attention, and its game total is, where are we at in the game total here? Looking at a 48.5 point total. So yeah, high game total here. I see a lot of ownership going on. Let's see. Who do we have getting the ownership in this matchup? Raheem Mostert, that's kind of an obvious one. I'm not seeing a ton of ownership on this one. Tua is at only 6%. This is initial projections. And the matchup for Miami's receivers, like the wide receiver position gets 18 DraftKings points a game versus Carolina. But the running back position gets 33 points a game versus Carolina. That puts Mostert on our radar as likely the main guy. Jeff Wilson should be back this week, but I don't think he's going to get worked in that much right away. And right now, Mostert should be the highest owned guy on the slate. but he's not. He's number 3. He's still up there, but he's still got under 20% projected ownership, which makes Mostert very interesting in this game. As far as Carolina's guys, the quarterback. Okay, so Bryce Young has a good matchup against Miami. He's likely to be throwing throughout the game. His ownership is very low. Bryce Young has sucked this year, but this would be a good opportunity for him to throw a ton because Miami's going to take probably a large lead in this one. And this is the type of game where we could start Tyreek thinking that the Miami Dolphins are going to take a giant lead. Mostert goes in there to clean up the rest of the game. So you got Tyreek and Mostert justifiable to put in a stack, running Bryce Young at 5,100 salary, along with one of his cheap wide receivers. Yeah, if Bryce Young is going to need to throw a lot in this game, I like the Carolina side of this game for a potential stack. Miami's defense has not been good this year. They're giving up, like I said, 18.6 points per game to wideouts, 21 points per game to quarterback, and 14 points a game to tight end. So, I like Bryce Young stacks with DJ Chark this week, kind of looking at it. Jonathan Mingo might be interesting too. Let's see what Mingo did. What's Mingo done recently? We haven't looked at him in a while. So Jonathan Mingo, he got 7 targets against Detroit in week 5. That's not bad. He got 6 targets versus Seattle. He got 8 targets versus Mingo's putting up targets. He's 3,500, and he's got a good matchup against Miami this week. So I'm liking those ugly Bryce Young stacks. Like, even though I did not think I'd like them, like now after taking a look at the matchup, I kind of like those ugly stacks with Bryce Young. You can run it back with whoever you want on the Miami side. They all got, like the talent to get there. And then, of course, Mostert, I would put Mostert in there no matter what, and then maybe run back along with either Tyreek or Waddle. I think you can pretty much do whatever you want on the Miami side. But Carolina, you got some good stacking opportunity there. Adam Thielen has the toughest matchup in this game. So don't know how high I am on Adam Thielen. I'd be looking more towards those wideouts, Jonathan Mingo and DJ Chark. So make a note of that for this week. Moving on to the next game, New England versus Las Vegas. This is just a disaster game, but it could be sloppy, interesting. The total on this one is 41.5. Not interested there. Where are they playing? Are they playing in New England? No, they're playing in Vegas. So, we saw Max Crosby getting pressure on what's his face, Jordan Love this past game. But other than that, they've been getting no pressure on the quarterback. Let's find out what Mac Jones has done so far this year. Mac Jones has been pulled 2 weeks in a row. Look at these points, 1.4 DraftKings points and 3.7 DraftKings points. Mac Jones is he might get pulled in the middle of this game. 13.3 versus New York Jets and 14.7 versus Miami. Now, this is an ugly stack. Mac Jones, he's got a great matchup this week. Vegas is giving up 20.4 points per game to the quarterback position. Mac Jones is someone to keep on your radar this week. Let's see how these matchups shake out. The running back situation in New England is a mess right now. The running backs, we got Ramondre Stevenson. He's just been awful. He got 2.4 points last week, 6 points the week before, 7.2 the week before that, off of 8, 14, and 19. They just screwed up. They completely screwed up Stevenson by signing Elliott. Elliott also doing absolutely nothing. 7.8, 4.2, 9.6. They can't get their running game going. if they can't get their running game going against Las Vegas, Vegas had allowed 23.4 running back points a game. That's actually a pretty good team to target for your running back position versus, New England's been giving up 24.9 points a game. This is a Josh Jacobs game. I like Josh Jacobs in this matchup, but I also like Devontae Adams, 21.1 points a game to wide receiver. But I think the game flow is going to favor Josh Jacobs a little bit better. So I kind of like Josh Jacobs, and it's a revenge game for Jacoby Myers too. And this is like one of those like real revenge games. So Jacoby Myers might be the guy that they give the opportunity to this week. And he just had a big week this past week, won a lot of money for us on Showdown. What did Jacoby Myers do? He's questionable. It looks like he's got a wrist injury. So keep an eye on his injury status. It's only Wednesday, so we don't know, like how that's going to play out. But he got 10 targets this week. Other games, he's gotten 12 targets and 10 targets. There's no reason not to focus on Jacoby Myers this week in this easy matchup against New England. And you know that Belichick is probably going to be honing in on Devontae Adams as far as the defensive side. But in general, Jacoby Myers had a much better matchup anyways, and he plays more from the slot where New England is also, from a DVOA perspective, pretty vulnerable. So Jacoby Myers, Josh Jacobs, and, if you wanted to do a Mac Jones stack in this one, you might stack him. I don't like slot receivers, the weakest spot for stacking them with Vegas. Oh, but the Vegas has given up now 4 games in a row with at least one reception of 40 plus yards. So I guess Kendrick Bourne would be interesting, but I wouldn't go all in on any of these Mac Jones stacks. But if you want to play one for fun, find out who, which of these receivers Mac Jones might throw to. Let's take a look here. Let's look at Devontae Parker. What's Parker done? Parker's got 4 targets last week. He's done nothing. He's done nothing from a fan. Like, none of these New England guys have put up any fantasy points. They're just a mess. Like, nothing for Kendrick Bourne apart from week 1 where he put up that monster game against Philly. But other than that, hasn't done anything. And he's only been getting like 5 targets a game. Not interested there. Yeah, I just find it hard to pull the trigger on anybody on the New England side. Juju, this is like Kansas City's wide receiver core. It's just like a bunch of just these scrubs that don't put up any points, and it's hard to figure out which direction to go. So tight end, tight end might be the way. Yeah, tight end. Vegas has given up 12 points a game to the tight end. We just targeted Luke Musgrave in that matchup against them this past week, past Showdown slate. Hunter Henry, what kind of points has he been putting up? Looks like he's got 0 fantasy points last week. He put up 9 the week before that. Weeks 1 and 2, he put up decent fantasy points. So maybe keep Hunter Henry on your radar if you want to do those ugly Mac Jones stacks. Gesicki, he's been getting targets, minimal targets. He's only 2,600. If you're desperate, Gesicki might be interesting. You hope he gets a touchdown, but I don't think you need to go there this week. So let's look at Tampa Bay versus Detroit. This is another interesting matchup. Baker Mayfield coming off of a bye week, been playing well up to that. Detroit giving up 19 points a game to the quarterback position versus Detroit giving up, where Tampa Bay is giving up 16 points a game to the quarterback position. Detroit is interesting with wide receiver matchups. That puts Josh Reynolds on our radar again this week. Also, Amon-Ra St. Brown, depending on his injury status. Let's look at what Detroit did this past week. Amon-Ra was hurt, but before that game, 7 games versus Green Bay. He probably got hurt midway through that game. 12 targets versus Atlanta. Hasn't been putting up as many targets as I would have expected. 7 targets in week 2 and 8 targets in week 1. And that's against Seattle and Kansas City. From a fantasy perspective, 19 points week 1, 18 points week 2, 22.6 points week 3, 16.7 in week 4. So he's been putting up the fantasy, decent fantasy points, not what you expect out of a guy that we were drafting in the first round in best ball, but he's been putting up decent points. He's facing off against Tampa Bay, who is giving up 20 points a game to wide receivers. So he's pretty interesting. He's pretty interesting if you want to stack this game. 43.5 point total, though. And I don't really like the matchups on either side. So this might be a game where I'm just looking for bits and pieces of, the tight end for Tampa Bay, Cade Otton, I believe, has a good matchup unless he is hurt. No, he's good. Cade Otton has a good matchup with Detroit giving up 16.8 points a game to the tight end position. So some interest in some of the pieces in this game. I got to do a little bit more digging into the actual matchup between these guys, but on the surface, does not look like a game I'm too interested in. But that could definitely change because both these offenses are capable of putting up points. Arizona versus LA, kind of like this matchup. I like how Arizona's been playing this year, and I like how LA has been playing this year, obviously. LA's defense has been pretty good, though. They're only allowing 17 points to the running back position, DraftKings points, 12 points to the wide receiver position, 16 points to the slots, and 15.4 points to tight end. So if you're doing a stack in this game and you wanted to stack Matthew Stafford with this game having a 48.5 point total, if you wanted to stack Matthew Stafford, what kind of ownership are we looking at on Matthew Stafford this week? He's about the 5th highest owned, but it's only 8%. His price still pretty cheap, $6K, $6,100 for Matthew Stafford. Josh Dobbs staying low at $5,200. Josh Dobbs has put up some pretty big games in tough matchups. He put up 17 points against Dallas, and he put up 23 points against San Francisco at a $5,200 salary. I kind of like the potential of Josh Dobbs in a matchup like this. You could stack him. Who would you stack him with? Josh Dobbs. Tight end has the best matchup, so maybe Zach Ertz. What's Zach Ertz been doing so far? Ertz has been 4 targets last week, 10 targets a week before that. Hasn't had any monster games, but he hasn't been bad either. He's been hovering right around 10 points. So not a lot of upside with Zach Ertz. But if you wanted to go with a Marquise Brown or something like that to stack with Dodson, I would bring it back with 2 guys from the Rams. Where are they playing? Are they playing in Arizona? They're playing in Los Angeles. So that sets up Kyren Williams to have a big game because Arizona is giving up 29.9. They're giving up 30 points a game to the running back position in addition to 23 points to the quarterback position. So, I mean, you could take your pick on which direction you want to target here with the Rams, but Kyren Williams is probably going to be the path of least resistance, and you can build a basic Dodson run back with Kyren Williams. Maybe stack Dodson with one of his receivers here. Mike, what's Brown been doing? Marquise Brown got 10 targets, 7 targets, 10 targets, 5 targets. So he's been getting a ton of targets. Has not had a breakout game yet. He's been scoring decent, though. He's been scoring around 16. He's only 5,300. He's been scoring, 3 times that, as far as, more than 3 times that with his output. So Marquise Brown is on the radar this week. And then all the Rams guys, Cooper Kupp, I like him. He's back up to 9K though. We're not getting the same discount we got on him the other day. Puka Nacua is 8K. So we're talking about expensive stacks here. So either one of those guys, along with Kyron Williams, would be interesting. Kyron Williams is only 6,500. Didn't do anything last week, but prior weeks he's gotten 30 points and 28 points and 17 points. He's a home favorite. How much are they favored by? 6.5. Yeah, Kyron Williams, he's probably going to be chalky too. Let's look at his ownership. He disappointed a lot of people last week, and that's, it's affecting his ownership. I only see him at 11%. This is only Wednesday. Probably creep up as the week goes on, but Williams is definitely on the radar this week. Philadelphia versus the Jets. This is an interesting one because Philadelphia's defense is kind of sneaky bad this year. And, Zach Wilson has been he's been a mess, but he's shown some ability. And Philadelphia has given up 21 points a game to the quarterback position, 21.6 points per game to the wideouts, 26 points a game to the slot position, and 13 points a game to the tight end. The only thing that Philly has been strong against is the running back position. And that's going to damage Breece Hall for us. But Breece Hall's been kind of inconsistent anyways. 31 points last week, but the only other week he scored over double digits was in week 1, where he put up 19 points against Buffalo. So Breece Hall is definitely interesting. He's going to be more of a wait to see what kind of ownership he had. He's got 19. Okay, Breece Hall has 20% ownership in an actual matchup that's not that great. So yeah, this is the type of game where you pivot to the quarterback and the passing game here, with clearly a better matchup, or at least Philly's allowing more fantasy points to those positions. Where are they playing? They're playing in New York. So, Zach Wilson been playing somewhat well recently, playing at home, an opportunity for an upset against a Philly team that has been doing a lot of infighting on the sidelines lately. Just get the feeling that, Philly's going to get upset at some point this year. The Jets need this win bad. Could be interesting Jets week. And what do we have for the total on this game? We got 42-point total, so nothing special there. But if the Jets are able to put up any type of a fight in this game and keep, Philadelphia's offense firing, then this game could go decent amount over that total. So Zach Wilson, what did he do last week? I mean, it's definitely an ugly stack. 9.5 fantasy points last week, but against Kansas City, when they were at home, he put up 20 points against a much tougher defense. So he does have upside potential. Garrett Wilson, this would be a decent get right spot for Garrett Wilson. And Wilson has 15 points against Kansas City in that tough matchup. Another tough matchup against Dallas, he put up 16 fantasy points. And then against Buffalo, when they had Tredavious, he put up 14 points. So Garrett has his biggest weeks in the toughest matchups. And he's only 6K. So I could see, if you wanted to do a Hurts stack in this one, or maybe, this might be, like the type of week where you could do, like Zach Wilson to Garrett Wilson, and then run it back with either Goddard, who has a good matchup against the Jets at 17 0.2 points a game the Jets are allowing to tight end, and they're allowing 27.1 points a game to the running back position. So, DeAndre Swift, Dallas Goedert, Garrett Wilson, Zach Wilson, and who's the slot? Oh, God, Randall Cobb. Garrett Wilson. So Garrett Wilson's been running a third of his routes in the slot anyway, so 27% at least. So Garrett Wilson's got, the best matchup in this. And if you wanted to add Hurts on in there with a Garrett Wilson run back, that's not a bad idea either. But I'd go on the Zach Wilson side, probably Zach Wilson to Garrett Wilson, run it back with Swift and maybe Goddard in there too, because you're going to need to get a pretty, we're going to need Zach Wilson throwing quite a bit. And if this game has upset potential, and it turns into any type of a back and forth playing in New York, then that it could be an interesting game. Just keep it on the radar. I probably went into it a little bit more than I needed to, but something to keep in mind for this week. So I would say my favorite games to target right now are Cincy versus Seattle, and I think that the rest of the field will be high on that one too. Minnesota, Chicago is another interesting one, and then Carolina, Miami. Those are all interesting right now on the surface. In addition to that Philly Jets game, I'm going to need to take a harder look at that game. But other than that, Rams are running game is interesting. Miami's running game is always interesting, especially this week. Jacksonville, looking at Christian Kirk, like his matchup. Looking at Gardner Minshew. Yeah, Jacksonville Indy is the other game that I had interest in. So, keep an eye out for Ugly Stack show. I didn't put one out last week because I had to do the showdown for the London game, so I didn't put one out this past week. But I'll put out an Ugly Stacks game later on in the week, so check that out. And this is my first look. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube page. Going to put out a showdown game script show at some point tomorrow. Those have been crushing, and tomorrow I already took a look at the matchup and already like what I see there. So I think that's going to be a interesting build for showdown tomorrow. So see you tomorrow, and until then, hit the like on this video and hit the subscribe button.